Good morning, everyone. Just checking if you want to give it a few more minutes, merely before we get started. As I see a lot of people are still logging on now.
Good morning, just checking audio.
Yes, perfect. We hear you. Thank you, Milena.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we have 31 participants at the moment. There are about 90 registered, so I hope there will be more.
Yeah, so maybe let's just give it another few minutes for people to log in at 9 a.m., grab their coffee.
Yes, indeed.
I'll give it another 2 minutes. I see we're almost at the 50 mark, so when we're there. All right, I think I'll get started now. Good morning, everybody. My name is Maha. Welcome to our conference to present a framework for assessing the effectiveness of biodiversity conservation measures in Estonia. I will be your host and moderator this morning. Before we go into introducing a bit of the study and what we're going to talk about today, let me just briefly explain a few technical components. We're hosting the workshop live on Zoom. It's being recorded and minutes are being taken today. If you have any questions, please place them in the chat. We will be monitoring the chat throughout our different sessions, and we will address questions during the designated Q&A sessions after per presentation. If you like a question or want a question, support a question, please like the question so that it gets voted up. That way we can focus on having the most popular questions addressed first. So without further ado, then let's get started. So the main aim of our project, Framework for Assessing the Effectiveness of Biodiversity Conservation Measures in Estonia, was to develop an approach that assesses the effectiveness of biodiversity conservation measures at the national level and at the level of the protected areas in Estonia. The developed methodology should assist the Estonian authorities in improving the effectiveness of the country's protected area network and in tracking aggregated progress made in the protected areas towards the national as well as international objectives, and to effectively manage all protected areas, defining clear conservation objectives, measures, and monitoring them appropriately. The project ran through almost 2 years, and our partners working on this project have been Trinomics, the Estonian, Latvian, Lithuanian Environment and Baltic Environment Forum Estonia, in cooperation with DG Reform and the European Commission, as well as the Estonian Environmental Board. And you'll be hearing from all contributors of this project today throughout the presentation. So the study was composed of multiple different items. First, we have a technical baseline review where we assess the current approaches in Estonia and identifies the needs of improvements by also looking at what other member states in the EU have been doing and their best practices. We've then developed the assessment methodology for protected area and for the national level. And we ran this methodology essentially on pilot assessments on 2 national parks, 5 nature reserves, 5 landscape conservation areas, 3 limited conservation areas with 25 species protection sites. After we've been able to validate our methodology through the pilot, we've conducted a training in Estonia for the Estonian conservation specialists. We had 2 sessions of those, which went very well. And finally, we took the methodology and developed an action plan to see forward-looking how we will be able to implement these changes and recommendations that have been made. The final seminars include today's international seminar, which is essentially the last step of our project. And we also had a national seminar in Estonian on the 8th of May. So all of this together drives us to our final step, which is our final communication and outreach that have been going on around this project to raise awareness about what's going on and to also have an open discussion with participants and stakeholders about the developments of the methods, but also of other best practices from other member states. The aim of today's webinar is to introduce the methodology and the action plan for the implementation and to get some feedback from you, have an open discussion. We've invited a series of experts to our panel who will also be commenting on the methodology and things that we will be presented today. You will have an opportunity to ask them about their experiences and about what they present, but you will also have the opportunity to obviously ask questions about the methodology and the action plan. The idea is to exchange our experiences around how to assess the effectiveness of biodiversity conservation measures and to discuss the developments of these effectiveness assessments and best practices in the boreal region countries at the European level. Who is here today? We have around 90 registered participants. I see 50 are online, so welcome to those that just joined us. We have people from Austria, Belgium, Croatia, really international and EU-wide. We have various consultancy companies, NGOs, universities, European institutions, and environmental nature conservation authorities. And we look forward to hearing your thoughts and comments in the chat. So the agenda for this morning is that we're going to start with a short opening from myself, of course, then Milena and Leelo. Milena is from DG Reform and Leelo Kukk is the Deputy Director General at the Environmental Board in Estonia. We will then move into the presentation of the Estonian methodology for the evaluation of the protected areas management effectiveness presented by Graeme Nicholls from Trinomics, followed by the action plan for implementation of the methodology presented by Pille Antons from ELLE. After each session, after each presentation, you will have a moment to ask questions in the chat. Like I said, we'll be monitoring that chat and then asking the questions to the presenters. We'll have a short break from 10:25 to 10:40. And after that, we have invited a panel discussion. We have 4 experts joining us today, and I will be presenting them in more detail at that time. They will be commenting on the methodology and the action plan, followed by open discussion and also answering your questions. A short break at 11:40, followed by Vedran Nikolić from DJ Environment, who is going to tell us about the latest development and next steps concerning the management effectiveness assessments at EU level. You will then have an opportunity to ask also some questions and have discussions with Vedran, and we'll be closing around 12:45 today. So without further ado, I would like to invite Milena Raykovska to please take the floor.
Thank you so much, Maha. Thank you. I would like to first address the participants. Of course, Ms. Kukk and Ms. Kais, and of course you as a moderator of this session. Also all the representatives of the Estonian Environmental Board and of the Estonian authorities. Also all colleagues from Trinomics and from the Estonian, Latvian and Lithuanian Environment and the Baltic Environment Forum. Dear participants, on behalf of DG Reform, which I'm representing today with my colleague Jan Zimmerman, who is the policy officer in leading this project, I would like to welcome you to this technical workshop or technical seminar for our project on framework for assessment of effectiveness of biodiversity conservation measures in Estonia. This is a project that marks a very important reform, and I will tell you a few words about it. First of all, this was a very ambitious reform project to support the Estonian Environmental Board in developing the aforementioned methodology. It's a great pleasure for me to be at the final seminar today together with my colleague Jan, as mentioned, because I remember very well when I had to actually present the project at the DG Reform Board in December of 2021. For a little bit of the cuisine of DG Reform and how the technical support project instrument works. What we do is that we assess all requests received from all the member states, and there is no national quota and there is no quota for a specific policy area. So I had to represent to DG Reform this project and defend it, and to convince the board that this is a great project to approve and fund for the next year, 2022, in which the project started. And I was very, very pleased that DG Reform Board immediately recognized the importance of this project. So fast forward 2.5 years later, and here we are. So allow me then to express my sincere gratitude to our, of course, beneficiary authority, the Estonian Environmental Board, and all the colleagues involved in this project from their side, for your trust and for your engagement. I want to thank also to the colleagues from Trinomics and Estonian, Latvian, and Lithuanian Environment, as well as the Baltic Environmental Forum, for embarking on this project for the last 2.5 years, for your expertise and efforts and continued commitment. And of course, thank you to everybody who is here today early morning. I don't know, I suppose you're all in the Baltics, but I'm in Brussels, so for us it's 9 o'clock. But for you, I guess 10, but still, thank you for joining. Allow me now to give you a little bit of context where this project fits in for us in the overall policy context. So obviously the topic is very important for Estonia, but it's also important for the EU and all the member states. It aligns with major EU objectives. Protecting nature and reversing degradation of ecosystem is at the core of EU biodiversity strategy for 2030. The strategy's primary goal is to put Europe biodiversity on the path to recovery by 2030. And if I can quote from it, effectively managing all protected areas, defining clear conservation objectives and measures and monitoring them appropriately. This is the commitment in the strategy, which is very important and which this project supports. And of course, the project aligns overall with the European Green Deal, which underlines the importance of biodiversity as well. Further on, as Maha mentioned earlier, we had a lot of very important topics or areas that we covered in this project. Of course, our aim was to enhance the biodiversity conservation, but to do it, we developed a very concrete plan with concrete concrete steps how to develop the methodology to assess the effectiveness of biodiversity conservation measures, how to test it, to pilot it in selected conservation areas and protection sites. And I can tell you from my own personal experience, I actually took my family to Estonia this past summer. So my family can, I'm not Estonian, I'm from Eastern Europe, but I decided that I would like to go and visit Estonia, and we were really mesmerized by your beautiful nature. So I don't know if we visited we visited a lot of nature places and of course sites, but I imagine that we visited also some of those sites and areas that were also where the methodology was also tested. So I'm very pleased to think that we have somehow contributed to their protection and conservation. And of course, the final and very important measure is the developing of the action plan for the implementation of these methodologies. I trust that all the insights and lessons learned from this project can serve as a valuable resource for other member states facing similar challenges. Because let's face it, we all need to work more and harder in order to improve our biodiversity conservation. In conclusion, again, huge thanks to all our Estonian partners. We have a long-standing partnership with Estonia, and we hope to continue it like this. And this project also is another testament of our fruitful cooperation. Thank you again to Estonian Environmental Board. And I would like to assure you, colleagues, that the technical support instrument and DG Reform stands ready to support your reform needs in the future. Finally, a message to all the participants. I encourage you to participate actively in today's event, in the discussions, to share insights, to comment, because your contributions are highly valuable. I wish you a successful and insightful seminar. Thank you.
Thank you, Milena, for your kind words and for your efforts to pushing these kind of projects through. Like you said, it's very important that we all contribute to nature and biodiversity conservation and protection during these times. Next, I would like to invite Leelo Kukk. Leelo, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, perfectly.
Very good. I'll try to share my screen because I'm not very familiar with it doesn't want to share the screen. Can somebody help me, because it says that somebody is already sharing it. I cannot open it.
You can try once again. I did stop sharing, so now it should be possible.
No. It still shows that it is shared, but maybe, okay, maybe I can start without opening then this screen and just say some words. But well, Milena, thank you for the kind words. And if you ended with thanks, then I will start with the words. So thanks, because it's for Estonia, at least for in our office, this project, TSI project, was the first one. We were very excited. It was totally different system, and we didn't know how well it will run. But it was really very smooth. What I have to say, that organizing from Brussels the events in our country and otherwise, it really ran very well. It was really good to have this kind of project. And I think that we will go for next projects also from our organization. Probably they will not be nature conservation topics, because environmental board is dealing with all other environmental topics up to radiation as well. But I know that there is now very big interest from my colleagues to also get some support to do the reforms in other topics as well. And when I would also like to thank our partners for Trinomics and also ELLE. And I hope that we were not very difficult partners. I'm sure that we were quite demanding, because as Milena mentioned, that it was a very ambitious project. And we also thought that this is quite ambitious, what we were expecting out from this project. And if you know that we tried this project to get money for 2 times, for the first time we didn't succeed. And then at the second time, we were very happy. And I think it was one of the first projects in this technical support instrument who supported nature conservation topics. And we were like a little bit pioneers, and I think it was very interesting to do that. But what I wanted to say, what I cannot show you right now, as not all the members here are Estonians, just to remember what we are, that we are a very small country.
Maybe you can just try again. Maybe you can share now.
No, it shows that it's green, and I cannot do that. Sorry, but maybe I will be very short and not go very much in details then. Just a brief overview that when we talk about small country, Estonia, half of our country is covered with forests, and we have approximately 20% of Estonia is covered with protected areas. And when we look very broadly that how we are doing with nature conservation, when I look at the average numbers of European unions, all the other countries, Estonia is doing very well. When we look at the species and habitats situation compared to other countries, I think we are second or third in Europe in that we have quite good situation. And thus you can ask that what's the problem, why you need this kind of project? But we have been asking from ourselves several times that these systems and work, what we are doing, whether it's the most efficient one. Because we really lack to analyze that those things, what we are constantly and continuously doing, whether this is the right thing. Maybe we can do something differently. And that's why we needed some very systematic overview of what we are doing and what we can do differently. That was, how to say, the trigger of the project to get this new methodology. And as our organization is covering the whole Estonia and all protected areas and all protected species, I think this was also very good, not just to look on based on one protected area, but the whole country. It was also, I think, quite demanding, but at the same time, it's then it's comparable all over our country. And what I'm really happy about is that now when we have this methodology, we have also another project, Estonian project, which now, with the help of Switzerland money, is up to 2028. We are going to run this methodology and test how it works. We are planning to control or do this methodology in 300 protected areas. And we also try to work out the IT module to start running this kind of methodology. So I'm very happy that we cannot that we don't do some kind of methodology and put it on the shelf, but now we can really take it into practice. So it's very good that it goes on and on. And what I'm also happy
Leelo, I think we're losing you a little bit.
maybe as level, people are more looking at this as a member of. Mm-hmm. Do you hear me now?
Yes.
No?
Now you're back, but I think with a bit of a lag.
Okay.
So
It's very strange that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. It's very strange that in my office, Teams is working perfectly. I have no problems with connection, but with this Zoom system, I always have problems. It's crazy, but nothing to do. But I will not take more the floor. At the end, I would also like to thank other partners, especially from Finland, because with the help of this project, we could visit also other countries to see what they are doing. And as I started to say before I lost my connection, that also Europark, it's where I'm a council member, has also got now the LIFE project. So hopefully with the help of this project, we can also have a methodology which is covering whole Europe, so we can compare each other on the European level. So thank you very much for this project, and let's get started with these real topics now.
Thank you so much, Leelo. It's great to hear that there's already next steps planned, and being ambitious is always a positive thing. So we were very happy to work on this project and help you fulfill the aims and goals to move forward. So next, I think we can start with presenting our more technical components. I would like to give the floor to Graeme Nicholls to present the methodology for the evaluation of the protected areas management effectiveness. Graeme, the floor is yours.
Fantastic. Thanks, Maha. Thanks, Leelo, as well, for the kind words. And yeah, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining such an early hour. So I hope you've got your coffees ready. So yeah, what I'm going to show you today is, given the time constraints, is a relatively high-level quick scan of the methodology that we've developed. Give you a bit of the flavor of like the conceptual underpinning that facilitated us developing the actual methodology. And yeah, some kind of food for thought about kind of additional supporting elements that will help drive this forward. So Leelo mentioned that the methodology we've developed it could be seen as almost like a beta version, where the Swiss project that's going to be initiated up to 2028 is going to further test, pilot, adapt, and basically calibrate this methodology. So I'm just going to show you the underpinnings of this methodology, and of course we'll have 10 minutes at the end for a quick Q&A session as well. So yeah, first of all, it's good to zoom out a bit and focus on what is the objective of this methodology. So the project that we implemented obviously had various different stages, various different objectives and various different work packages, essentially, which each focused on separate elements. So moving on from the methodology, my colleague Pille is going to talk about the action plan, about what actually, what can be used to facilitate, to push forward the methodology in the coming years. So first of all, just to focus on the main objectives of the methodology itself, I won't repeat the words here verbatim, but in essence, the methodology is obviously to assess the effectiveness of biodiversity conservation measures in Estonia, and importantly at two different levels. So we're looking at the national level, but very importantly also at the protected area level. The kinds of aspects that at the very minimum that the methodology should assess is biodiversity aspects, of course, but also other additional elements such as socioeconomic, regulatory aspects, such as lawsuits, for example, conflicts within protected areas, management decisions, and also operational aspects. So what are the evaluation processes in place currently? How can they be improved? Leelo mentioned very much they're looking for efficiency gains within the system of evaluations that are currently undertaken in Estonia. In addition to that, the methodology should assess how conservation measures impact short and long-term socioeconomic factors, ecosystem services, national climate change mitigation objectives, etc. So it's a very wide net that we're covering here. So let's get stuck into some of the processes we undertook in this project. So as kind of a baseline assessment, so in the first stage of the project, we essentially undertook an evaluation of the processes that are currently in place within Estonia of how protected areas are managed, and come to some kind of common denominators, challenges, and barriers that we encountered when evaluating all of these various documents and tools, about where we see the potential weaknesses, challenges, barriers, inefficiencies within the current system that would help us inform the development of the methodology. So a few inputs that were used here. This is obviously not all of them. It's a quite extensive list, but there was there was previously key studies done in Estonia that looked at protected area management evaluation. Obviously, were used as a key inputs to form our analysis, but then also a few conceptual frameworks and actual tools for protected area management effectiveness. So the most commonly cited one is the IUCN WCPA framework, which I'm going to introduce in the slides in a moment. There's of course management effectiveness tracking tool, and there's also a recently published EU methodology for a protected area management effectiveness tracking, focusing on marine Natura 2000 areas. In addition to this, there was a few workshops that we undertook throughout the project. Some of you would have attended also the DG Reform TAIEX workshop that was organized in Estonia. And of course, lots of discussions, reviews, and analysis of various member states and other countries, essentially protected area management effectiveness tools. Again, in the TAIEX seminar, we were given some really nice examples from Finland, from Scotland. But there's a quite extensive long list here, again, of different best practices that we reviewed and took into consideration in the methodology. So if we just move on to the next slide, please. So I'll just give you a quick overview of the conceptual underpinning. I'm sure a lot of you are already aware of this, but this essentially formed the basis of our research questions, of our framing of the entire methodology itself. We focused on the IUCN WCPA, so the World Commission on Protected Areas tool. In a nutshell, this tool gives you essentially 3 specific elements to focus on, along with different stages of analysis and evaluation within each of these stages. I'll briefly go through these in a moment. And essentially, this framework holistically gives you a circular process, a circular framework to iteratively approach and evaluate protected areas and national level protected areas management to repeat evaluations and enable learning of complex systems. So it's essentially a basis to evaluate the management effectiveness, and it poses a series of elements, stages, and questions to give you a grasp about what kind of, when you're conducting evaluations, what kind of elements you need to focus on. I'm just going to briefly touch upon each of these different elements now. So if you just click on to the next slide. The first one we're going to look at is design and planning. And just go to next again, please, guys. Thanks very much. So what we see here is there's 3 different considerations within the design and planning stage. First of all, focusing on the context of the sites. So what we're looking at here is the condition of the habitats of species, quality of baseline data, for example, presence of significant data gaps, overview of what significant pressures are included within that area. Objectives, and we're talking about essentially the formulation of specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound objectives and target conditions. So what do you want the values of your habitats, of your species to be? What are the targets that you want to reach with these conditions? Conservation measures. Here we're basically asking questions about how will objectives be met, what measures are needed, what types of measures are needed, are conservation measures established to achieve all of the objectives for the protected area, did they target specific pressures, etc. So if we move on from this element to the next one, where we're going to focus on the adequacy and appropriateness, what kind of questions we're looking at here, what kind of elements we're looking at here, rather, are the inputs and the processes. So the inputs here, we're essentially looking at, again, whether knowledge gaps have been actively addressed within management cycles, within evaluation cycles. What kind of monitoring processes are also in place? How do we go about management? And what are the financial inputs or the resources there in order to allow you to do the evaluation? Another key element here is, of course, stakeholder and conflict management and engagement. Throughout the evaluation processes, are these kind of elements taken into consideration and included within the analysis? The final stage of the framework is the delivery. So essentially, we're focusing here on the end product of the evaluation. So the obvious thing to focus on here is, of course, the outputs. So within the management cycle, were the activities that you planned to implement, were they actually conducted? How were they conducted? What kinds of measures were conducted? So this could be, for example, not only conservation measures such as restoration or active management measures. It can also be monitoring activities, inventories done, studies on, for example, conditions of sites. And most importantly, and kind of completing the circle of this evaluation is the outcomes. This is the desired objectives, whether they have actually been met. So were the targets that you set for the condition of species or habitats, were they achieved? Has there been any trend improvements? Have there been further violations that have hindered these outcomes, for example? So that completes the iterative circle. So if we just click onto the next slide there. So in a nutshell, focusing on these different phases, on these different elements, can help you give a sense of, during the evaluation process of your protected areas, are you effectively managing the sites at hand? So this was the conceptual underpinning of the entirety of the methodology study. I'm next going to give you, relatively briefly, given the time we have available here, is a quick overview of the approach. So yes, in a nutshell, what we have here is, like I mentioned at the beginning, we were very much focusing on two different levels of evaluation of management effectiveness, at the protected area level and also at the national level. So I don't expect you to remember all of the different elements I very quickly just went across before relating to the WCPA framework. But essentially what we decided to do is divide not only between protected area and national level, but also divide between the thoroughness of evaluations to take place within the entirety of a management cycle in Estonia, currently at around about 10 years. So going from left to right, snapshot evaluation. Again, I won't go through all of the details here, but in a nutshell, the snapshot evaluation is something that we propose to promote relatively high level skimmed data on key points from management plans and evaluation assessments. So this will be very much focusing on outputs for the protected areas in relation to have any new pressures, have any new threats been notified within the management plan within the last year. At a national level, it would be very much a quick scan, high level overview of progress on meeting new conservation, new common pressures and threats, and a short summary report for decision makers. So the snapshot evaluation is very much, as you could probably guess by the title, very much a quick and focused evaluation, only on a few specific elements from the previous conceptual framework that I presented. Midterm evaluation would happen within the middle of the evaluation cycle. We're aiming at about 4, 5, 6 years here. And again, split between the protected area level and the national level. Protected area level would very much focusing on the changes in the operational management. So, for example, what is needed in the next period of the management cycle to address, to achieve the outcomes that we need. Whereas at the national level, it's very much an intervention looking at the enabling measures or the financing and the enforcement. So it's essentially a step up from the snapshot evaluation in terms of thoroughness and comprehensiveness. And then the full evaluation would be very much at the end of the management cycle. Depending on the decision made by the Estonian authorities, are either 10 years or 12 years to align with EU nature reporting. And again, this would be very much focusing on all elements of the framework that I produced before, giving a full overview of each of the components and an assessment of each of these. So without further ado, let's quickly move on to the next slide. I won't dwell too much on this. It's a lot to take in one screen. So essentially, this gives an overview of the kind of cycle that we foresee in the evaluation assessment approach. So like I mentioned, if we look at the entire cycle, we expect to take place within 10, potentially 12 years. Each year, as you can see with the blue boxes in the circular motion, we would propose to have these progress assessments at a national level, which takes output assessments from the protected area sites to inform what has been done and are we achieving targets at a very quick scan level every year. In year 5, we'd propose to have these progress assessments and midterm reviews of protected areas. And then these feed into basically each of the midterm evaluations and final evaluations from protected area sites themselves. So as you can see here, there's quite a linkage between, and it's quite logical, between protected area assessments and national level assessments. Of course, the national level assessments would rely on very different questions to be answered, but they are in some way or form, how could I say, integrated or essentially information from the protected area site evaluation are integrated within the national level assessments themselves. If you go on to the next slide, this perhaps gives you a bit of a better, more easy on the eye overview about the timing of these assessments that we propose. So if we begin on the left-hand side, you'll see the elements that I mentioned in the conceptual framework of the WCPA about the different kind of evaluation themes that we want to cover at different stages. So the first methodological term that we want to use is the snapshot assessments. Just click on the next button. What we should see here, yes. So essentially, each year, what we're proposing here are the snapshot evaluations on the conditions, the pressures, the threats, and the outputs. Again, in our report, we differentiate very slightly between these different elements in terms of the robustness of the assessment we expect to take place on a yearly basis for these, because we're of course aware of the resource limitations for these assessments. And then on the next one, what we're proposing is these midterm quick scan assessments to occur around about years 5 or 6, but only focusing on these 4 elements here. So the condition, pressures and threats, conservation objectives, and the conservation measures. So again, what we're proposing here is essentially the main purpose is to evaluate with these snapshot assessments, these quick scan, assessments, is to evaluate the ways in which established conservation measures were established, if they were adequate and appropriate, and then the evaluation would focus on the inputs, the process, the outputs that are likely to achieve the desired conservation objectives. In addition to this, during the midterm evaluation, we propose to have these additional elements. And again, this is depending on resources available. These darker yellow boxes indicate basically additional information that could be collected on the inputs, process, outputs, and outcomes. This may not be required depending on if there are new or significant pressures that have been monitored within sites, for example, or if they have not yet been part of management planning. So this would be the additional comprehensiveness added to these midterm evaluations. And then finally, what we propose at the end, and again, I keep saying 10 or 12-year cycles. 10-year cycle is the current Estonian management cycle timelines, But in order to align with potentially EU reporting cycles, which are every 6 years, we propose that potentially extending this to 12 years could be feasible. And then the full evaluation in this year 10 or 12, it's very much an in-depth evaluation of the management plans, focusing on the assessment just before the duration of the protected area management plans are submitted. And it would be essentially inputs and evaluations used to inform new management planning in the next cycle. So a very important phase of the cycle here, gathering all of the inputs from the entirety of the cycle to inform the next management planning cycle. If we move on to the next slide. So if we zoom out again, and we're focusing on these two different aspects, we're focusing on the national level evaluation and the protected area evaluation. I'm going to focus more on the protected area site evaluation today, because this is the one that we've provided more inputs on, providing an actual tool, which perhaps is more interesting for the purposes of this conference today. The national level, I'll very quickly go through here, is essentially, we propose a series of evaluation principles, essentially, giving the kind of policy and political challenges that we faced in developing concrete ideas. The national level evaluation that we propose is a little bit higher level. So we just briefly go through the 5 phases here that we propose let's move on, given the time constraints, to the site level. Okay, so I see the site level PAIM tool is on my screen now, giving me an indication I need to speed up. So let's move on to this one. So the site level PAIM tool, what we've very much focused on here is adapting the WCPA tool and the MET tool that are used in the predominant number of PAIM assessments. And we've very much adapted this to the Estonian context. So taking into consideration all of the baseline information that we collected, all of the challenges, an overview of all of the data available currently in Estonia, an overview of the projects that are in place to further collect data in Estonia at the moment. We essentially developed an adapted MET tool to essentially assess the protected area management effectiveness within sites in Estonia. The focus in this tool that we developed was very much on trying to consolidate as many context-specific questions to Estonia as possible, but also to develop as many predefined response options as possible. This tool is essentially a questionnaire that site evaluators can implement on site, and they're given a series of predefined questions to ask about the different WCPA elements I introduced earlier. So this questionnaire tool gives you a series of questions, a series of guidance, contextual information to help you understand what is the question trying to ask, what are the desired outputs we want from you as an evaluator, and as much as possible, a series of predefined answers. And the idea for this is to essentially to help the digitization of data within Estonia, and also to allow somewhat comparability between sites. With the predefined answers, it helps with this comparability between sites. So as the slide shows here, a series of questions with a series of subcomponents related to the WCPA framework, and the response options can be scored. So this will possibly be in the next stage in the previously mentioned Swiss project, is that a lot of these answers can help you give an overview of the effectiveness, and we say in parentheses here, to be interpreted with care. It can give you a snapshot of what can be determined as the effectiveness of measures that are taken within a site. So if you just click on the next buttons there, Kai, we should give you a quick overview. So this is a snapshot from the Excel tool itself to give you a bit of a flavor of some of the questions that are asked, how it's structured, and how it's formulated. And then, as you would have seen with the various MET tools and with the EU methodology, we also give this kind of scoring radars. We have a series of these different charts that can be very easily interpreted at the beginning of the Excel for the assessors to look at, to ascertain key elements. For example, if you want to look at the difference, on the different scorings of the different WCP elements, if you want to have a scoring system that automatically highlights what are new pressures and threats that are being identified in certain areas. And then this information, this data can then be upscaled to give these national perspectives also, depending on what data you want to pluck from these protected area sites evaluations. So if we just go on to the next slide, I won't spend too long on this because my colleagues at ELLE, so Pille will be presenting in addition some of these supporting elements, but I think it's worthwhile just quickly including here. So what we also proposed within the methodology and within the action plan as well, if you just go back one slide, please, that would be great. Fantastic. It's a series of essentially supporting elements, which we think are absolutely necessary to drive forward further management effectiveness, good practices, essentially. So just to very briefly go through these, the first one that we propose is this nature language, where we think it's very key to have standardized, as far as possible, standardized nomenclature and terminology on aspects such as habitat descriptions, precious threats, management measures. Other elements could be included. For example, we came across lots of examples in the Netherlands, for example, about standardized workload of measures. So, for example, you can categorize types of measures that are necessary to combat certain types of pressures and give an indication of expected workload or work days required to implement those measures. These kind of standardized terminologies can help you gain efficiencies, transfer best knowledge, lots of different routes you can go with this. In the TAIEX seminar, we were given a nice example from Swedish counterparts about these kind of problems about terminologies that can result in conflicting management issues in protected sites. So that would be a first point, this common nature language. And again, this could also be aligned with EU terminology as well to facilitate, for example, efficient reporting practices. The second aspect is of these nature atlases. There's been a lot of development in Estonia in recent years on developing all sorts of different mapping tools. What we propose here is essentially further information on these interactive maps in relation to pressures, which is currently missing. And if you look at if you click on the next slide there, Kai, a super quick example here. Quite difficult to interpret, but this is from Flanders in Belgium. This is a biological evaluation map, which essentially gives you map layers indicating the condition of different ecosystems and basically helps you prioritize based on different valuations which ecosystems, depending on their condition, depending on their ecosystem service values, should be prioritized for XYZ management practices, restoration, for example. So that's a super quick example. So we propose to further develop these nature atlases to incorporate all sorts of different metrics that can be, again, taken from these protected area management assessments tools that we've developed. Very briefly, the nature management map, building upon the previous atlas that we just discussed. Nature management maps can be pretty wide encompassing, but what we propose to include here is, for example, maps that include elements such as maintenance, restoration measures, recreation measures, visitor management, so the maintenance of infrastructures that are needed. And again, a super quick example here is from, I believe it's from Noord-Brabant, which is a province in the Netherlands. This is essentially a map that helps you search for areas that are within management plans notified for future recreation, so the re-establishment of natural areas, for example. They can also be used for future restoration projects that are going to be taking place within these different ecosystems and habitats. So again, this can help you with various planning elements to help you understand at a holistic level what areas can we prioritize for management practices, management measures, and yeah, where management plans are even missing, for example. And the final bullet point that we have here is updated guidance. I won't dwell too much on this one, but it's very much links to the above points, is the need for further guidance on the standardized nomenclature, the word that I can't say, the standardized terminologies and nomenclatures within measurements, within pressures. We see a need for this throughout Estonia to bind together, to make sure everyone's talking on the same and singing from the same choir book about how protected areas are managed, what measures are implemented, and what different pressures and threats exist within these protected sites. So almost like a coding system of all of the different aspects within management plans. We think that this updated guidance would very much facilitate this moving forward. I realize I've been through that incredibly quickly, but we've run out of time, unfortunately. So I believe we've got another 10 minutes or so for Q&A. I absolutely, could stress the need to read the reports that we've made to back up this methodology. I think it's over 200 pages, more or less, the reports that we've developed. So hope you, can understand it's difficult to get through this in 20 minutes, but happy to take any questions, and thanks for your time.
Yes, there is one question. What kind of database and GIS technologies do you use for atlas and mapping?
Can you repeat that again, Kai? I didn't...
What kind of database and GIS technologies do you use for atlas and mapping?
Yes, so that we haven't actually developed this yet. These are recommendations that we see to facilitate moving forward within Estonia. For the atlas, the common, I don't want to say baseline, but the most practical solution that we see that currently exists within Estonia is the ELLE based mapping of ecosystem conditions and coherence, etc. That we see that this, along with different developments from, for example, the interactive maps by the Estonian Land Board, there are various examples that we see that there's a need to combine these together and add on different elements from the protected sites questionnaires or tool that we've developed. So depending upon what the policy direction or the policy targets are within Estonia, certain quantitative responses from these protected site evaluations can then be withdrawn and integrated into these maps. So whether that's on new pressures that have been identified within these sites within the management cycle, whether it's extension of the protected area sites, size or delineation itself. So it can almost act as almost like an alert system to inform next management cycles. That is always the key that's in the back of your mind throughout all of this, is how can it inform the next management cycle. So it's very much a decision that needs to be made about what elements within these maps, what components needs to be focused on depending on the outputs you get from these evaluations at site level.
Thanks, Graeme. I don't currently see any other questions, but for those who have not seen the chat, the methodology will be published both in English and in Estonian. Actually, there is one more question that's come in from Mart. You have mentioned that are aware of resources limitations. Please, to which extent were you able to consider and estimate the resource demands to implement the proposed plans?
Very good question. That is something that we haven't, that hasn't been within the scope of this. It isn't like a costing exercise, which we agree would be useful. But again, just to reiterate, the resource challenge is not just in Estonia, that's very much across the board with all of these PAIM assessments, which is very much why we try to streamline the approach as much as possible, not only to the Estonian context, but also, like I mentioned at the beginning, in the site level assessments in particular, is try to have as many predefined response options as possible. And this was a very long process in arriving at these predefined response answers, because obviously this can be a bit sensitive to what information you're getting from the protected sites. But to answer your question, the costing of how much this evaluation would incur per site or at a national level is something that hasn't been done in this assessment.
Thanks, Graeme. I don't currently see any more questions in the chat, and looking at the time, maybe we should also move on. Mart, I see one more question. I will just quickly take it. You've departed from the biodiversity task, but the conservation areas have several other important targets, such as landscape and heritage.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and this is included also within our methodology also. Something that we haven't included in this presentation also is species protection sites evaluations. So within the protected area levels, without going into details, there's also these species protection sites, which we also include in our evaluations. But these landscape values is something that we mention in the report also about something that needs to be further incorporated within these assessments. And again, this kind of feeds into these supporting elements and the action plan that we propose. Is that there needs to be further elaboration on assessments to incorporate these elements and cultural and heritage aspects. Yes.
Thanks. There's a few more questions, but I think we should move on. And if these don't get answered in the process, then we will still address them. So thank you, Graeme, for presenting. The chat will stay open, so please, if you see questions that you're interested in, vote them up. And I would like to give the floor to Pille to present us the action plan of implementation.
Yes, thank you. Hello from my side. So I'm Pille Antons, and I represent one of the project partners, Estonian, Latvian, Lithuanian environment. I tried to share my screen. I hope you can see my presentation slides now.
Yes, we can see them. Thanks.
Yeah. So in my presentation, I will introduce the needed actions to implement the proposed methodology. We have realized that the development of the methodology is actually only one very small step. And for the full implementation of the assessment system, there is a wide range of additional steps that need to be taken. Before moving on to the action plan, I would like to provide some background first. As part of the project, we carried out a pilot assessment in which specialists from environmental board tested the proposed questionnaires on selected protected areas. And the pilot assessment revealed a number of challenges that need to be addressed. It showed that the site-level assessment, meaning completing the questionnaires, is quite time-consuming, and much of the time is spent on collecting the necessary input data, for example, data on condition of species and habitats, information on implemented measures, and other details. And even if the needed data is available, it is often incomplete, difficult to interpret, or fragmented across different databases, which are managed by different data holders. And among other things, one of the main shortcomings is that there is no comprehensive overview of the actions implemented in the protected area for conservation planners, because those measures are implemented by different parties. And all this also affects the evaluation outcome somewhat, because the more incomplete the data, the more the results of the assessment depend on the knowledge and the experience of the evaluator. A person who is very familiar with the site knows where to find and how to take into account also information that is not very well documented, while a specialist with less experience will have to rely on what is actually written in the database. And basically those challenges were also the basis for our action plan. In order to meet those challenges, we developed an action plan with a key focus on improving the efficiency and time consumption of the assessment system by more harmonized and specific management planning, improved data management, common principle for data analysis, and of course, IT solutions. The measures in the action plan can be divided into three broad categories. First, there are some administrative and organizational actions that need to be taken. It includes setting an overall assessment framework and agreeing on who will do what and how. Secondly, there is a need for a number of additional methodologies and more detailed guidelines. Some of these are needed to provide direct input to the evaluation questions. For example, how to analyze the outcomes, the condition of species and habitats. And others are more supporting approaches, for example, an improved structure for management plans that was already mentioned. And the third group of actions, which is the most extensive part of the action plan, are the IT solutions, both the evaluation model itself and also supporting tools for data collection and analysis. So for administrative actions, the first step is to agree on main principles of assessment. The general framework of the methodology is in place, but some details should be adapted according to actual needs and possibilities. Mainly, how long will be the assessment cycle for different types of areas, and whether we can cover all protected areas in Estonia, or due to limited resources, we have to prioritize and make some kind of selection, which is one possibility. Also, clear roles and responsibilities need to be assigned both for assessment procedure itself, as well as for data collection and data analysis. And information exchange between agencies and different departments need to be ensured. And of course, resources need to be allocated for all needed tasks. Technical solutions play a key role in making assessment easier and faster, and the results of the assessment are more comparable as well. And it turns out that the list of needed IT tools in Estonia is quite long. First of all, we need an IT tool for assessment questionnaires, which would enable completing the assessment forms, storing the completed assessment forms, analysis of the results, and visual presentation of the results. In addition, it is very important that the developed solution would enable further development of the methodology, like, for example, adding additional questions for new topics, or removing some questions which do not seem relevant after further testing. And secondly, to reduce the amount of manual work, it is important to improve data exchange with existing systems and databases. This includes retrieving data from different sources and automation of the assessment process where possible. Possible databases that need to be used include data on condition of conservation values, information on pressures, implemented measures, a violation of the protection rules, and so on. And as I already mentioned, the conservation planners lack a complete overview of implemented measures. So very important is development of a database of measures to gather information from different actors. However, it's quite a lot of work, and this development work takes probably several years before it's finished. So there is probably also need for a simpler temporary solution for the first round of evaluations. This can be done maybe using the similar Excel format as we used in pilot assessment. And then later, a more advanced solution and more efficient solution can be implemented. And I will also give a short overview of different supportive approaches and tools. Some of them were already mentioned in the previous presentation, but not all of them. Part of the methodology is assessment of outcomes through changes in the condition of conservation values. But protected areas in Estonia may have up to, let's say, 100 conservation values. And it is not realistic to expect that we could collect enough reliable data to monitor changes for each value in each area. Therefore, we need to have an approach for selecting a so-called key indicator values for which changes in condition can be evaluated. We do not have this approach at the moment, so this needs to be separately developed. Related to that, there is also need to develop a common approach and maybe also technical tools how to assess those changes in condition of conservation values. And doing that, we can consider various data collection methods. In addition to monitoring information, there are also inventories, studies, or for example, remote sensing or modeling that could be used. And some support and guidelines are needed to process and interpret this data. Oh, now it went too far. Okay, now it's the right slide. We have also proposed adapting the structure of management plans. Today, some of the important information is in the form of long descriptive text, and it takes time to find facts you need for evaluation from it. So the recommendation is to present most important information in more uniform and structured way to enable quick data requests and maybe even automatic queries. As already mentioned, there should also be a common terminology and classification systems for describing objectives, pressures, measures, and this common terminology should be ideally used across different databases if possible. And as also already mentioned, whenever possible, the data should be linked to spatial data, meaning map layers, and all relevant information about the conservation management should be compiled into one application to enable data analysis and to support the overall planning process. And In addition, there are some questions in the questionnaire, which during pilot assessment were answered based on expert opinion mainly, but those would benefit from more coordinated common approach. Firstly, Environmental Board has highlighted that there is a need for a common approach and maybe also technical tools to assess pressures and threats, including their impact and importance for protected areas and concrete conservation values. Secondly, there are questions in the methodology about the impact of protected areas on ecosystem services and ecological coherence. And for that, we see that already available data could be used. There has been a great project in Estonia for mapping ecosystem services. This project was led by Environmental Agency. And as a result of this project, we have detailed spatial data about ecosystem services and the condition of different ecosystems, and this data is covering all Estonia. So these map layers can be used for the assessment, and we just need an agreed approach how to use them. The positive thing is that this project is likely to continue, meaning that the map layers will be updated regularly. And lastly, there was already question about some elements that are not very well covered by the methodology at the moment. And those additional topics can be considered in the future, how to add and whether there's actual need to add additional questions to the methodology. In my last slide, I have a general time frame, but I will not go into details with it. The main message of this overview table is mainly that the list of needed actions is quite long, and it will probably take several years to finish all needed development and implement the full assessment system. Also, it's not really a step-by-step roadmap because all actions are quite strongly interlinked and they rather need to be implemented in parallel. But the good thing is that, as we heard earlier, many actions are already in process. Leelo mentioned some projects in her presentation. And the whole action plan has been actually developed in very close cooperation with the Environmental Board and Environmental Agency and some other stakeholders who are the real users of the methodology or of the supporting system behind it. So it seems quite realistic that we achieve at least some of the goals of the action plans. And this is all from my presentation. So if there are any questions, we try to answer those.
Thank you, Pille. I don't currently see any questions in the Q&A. There are no questions at the moment.
Or can we take the questions that were left unanswered before?
There was only one question left unanswered, which Graeme has kindly answered in the chat. So at the moment, there's no questions. Maybe we just let everyone have a short break, and then hopefully everyone can grab a coffee, refresh, and come back with some more questions. Does that sound good for everyone? Pille, Merle, Kai? Yes? Perfect. Then we'll go into, I believe we have a 10-minute break, right? So we'll see you all here at 10:30 to go into our panel discussions. See you all.
Then,
Hmm?
or 11:30 in Estonian and Baltic time.
Yes, thank you. And 11:30 in Estonian time, correct. So see you in 10 minutes. Thank you all. Good areas. Yes, his team oversees the Scotland's Protected Areas Monitoring Programme, which is currently undergoing significant reform in order to meet the requirements of the OECMs and the increased focus on delivering healthy ecosystems. They are exploring innovative IT and data opportunities to ensure that the monitoring program is efficient, focuses on delivering outcomes, and makes the best use of available data. So thank you all of you for joining us this afternoon. Really excited to have you here. I hope you've had a chance to think about the presentations that you've heard today. I'll just start by asking, what have been your impressions for the proposed method and the approach presented? Maybe you can share some key reflections, and I'll just pass the floor first to Nigel, and then we can move along the panel.
Okay, thanks very much, and nice to be here. There's two views of assessments. One is that they should be the same all over the world. They should be globally consistent so we can get an overview, a global overview. Academics particularly like that approach. The other is that they should be adjusted per country. I'm very much in that second camp. It's one of the reasons I'm here in Jordan, taking the Met and really changing it in some ways quite dramatically to meet their particular requirements. So I like the fact you're doing that there in Estonia. I also really like the integration of assessment at a national and a site level. And I haven't seen that so much in other places. In fact, I'd recommend, or I'd urge you to share that. There's a Facebook page for Met users and similar kind of assessment. So that would be an interesting thing to share and see if other people have done that. I'm slightly surprised at the sort of thing that Pille showed right at the end of her presentation, that the things that still to be developed, things like social assessment, governance assessment, indicator species. There's quite a lot of work already. I suspect there's stuff you could pick up and you'd probably want to adjust it, but I'd like to hear more about why you think it's going to take that much time to take the steps further. And the other reflection I had reading the report and hearing the presentations is that for me, the most important thing is not actually the results of the assessment, but what you do with them. And we always urge people, in fact, now it's mandatory within the Met online, that you say, if you haven't scored a maximum, you say what you're going to do about it. And the manager then ends up with a list of tasks, if you like. I know this is being integrated into management plans, so this is in your mind, the results are going to be integrated. But I'd like to hear slightly more about how you're capturing next steps within the assessment. I think that's my 2 minutes, so I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. Michael, would you like to take the floor next?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I have to say that a lot was said already in the previous presentation by Pille Antons, where there were really listed well the challenges that we face in all countries. Just a few points. What I hear, please take what I say with some reservation, because of course I don't see the details that are in the methodology, because as said, it is more than 200 pages of the document in the document. But what I say is, what I think is quite important now to consider is also OECMs, because there are two levels. One is PA's level and one is the national level. So we should also think about the OECMs, because this is a new tool still under the definition at the European Union scale. So there is still at biogeographical seminars a lot of discussions about how to tackle with this and how to use it as a tool. And this is something like a transition between, let's say, the free landscape and the protected areas. So I don't see it in the methodology, but I think that it should be there somehow mentioned. The second, and I thought it was also said by Pille, smart objectives or flexibility or key indicator values. I don't see it in the methodology, and I would like to learn more about what are, let's say, the key indicator values, because I believe that it should be a part of the methodology already. I fully understand that there will be some other steps in the process that will be held by national bodies, but some kind of indication is very important. Why? There was a question in the chat, how it is harmonized, how this approach as proposed is harmonized with other countries or with the EU level. I think that the methodology should have something like a core values or indicators the same at the EU level. That should be based on EU nature directives and also the EU biodiversity strategy. Maybe it is there, but I don't read it, so I cannot read it there. And then, of course, there should be a space for countries for their national conditions. And of course, then they can modify the approach based on their traditions and the nature conservation. And the last comment, I fully agree also with Pille Antons that the future tool, the IT tool, should be something like a central tool that is used by all stakeholders, because there is a lot of measures that are not implemented by state bodies, but also non-governmental organizations, and more by private sector also. So Excel tool, as mentioned, is good, but of course not sufficient for this. And finally, the last comment that it was also mentioned by Nigel, cultural and social and other landscape values. I think that the whole system is so demanding that it should be modular. So to go step by step, to start with nature conservation values and then to amend the system by others if you have a capacity or if you are really okay with how it is going on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. I'm collecting some of the notes from all of you, and then we'll ask Pille and Graeme to comment on some of the questions you've had. So I'll give the floor first to Matti.
Okay, thank you. Well, I have quite the same findings and comments as Nigel and Mikhail said earlier. But first of all, I would like to congratulate Estonia that you have already resources to go forward with this report and finding. That's really great news. We have had continuous cooperation with Estonia for so long that I understand that this is challenging, of course, to find a way to go forward with this process. But very nice that you have resources for that. Well, as Mikhail and Nigel said earlier, it is crucial that that data that is collected fulfills the need in site level, national level, and European level at the same time. And the data can be used analysis in all those needed kind of like circumstances. So otherwise we cannot do it actually. That is our finding from Finland as well. Also quite pleased with this report that this understanding the need to do this kind of effectiveness evaluation in national level, so that it's as much as can be done in protected area network level, easier it is in the long run. So that's quite nice finding in the report, and also quite interesting. What I found really interesting is that those lessons learned and also that kind of like what kind of information is collected in different levels is quite the same as our findings and our methods that we use in Finland, such as, for example, our Natura 2000 site assessment. We have done it for all our Natura 2000 sites, almost 2,000 of them, 5 million hectares. And it's quite the same information that we have collected that you found important to collect. So clearly there is common understanding in different countries, but how to kind of like analyze that further. That is the big question. So finally, one finding that I have is connected with that OECM and this 30 by 30 target as whole, is that how one element there could be that how resilience is the system to fulfill the needs of the future. That could be one part of this holistic analysis, because then we can kind of be proactive with those actions that we take. So thank you very much for this information, very valuable and interesting.
Thank you. Really great thoughts there, Matti. Dave?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, first of all, I just want to congratulate everybody. It's a really well articulated approach here, and it's really exciting actually to see the common challenges and opportunities that there are, not just to apply this with in Estonia, but more widely. I really like the holistic approach that's been taken, so having those links and that time taken at the beginning of the whole process, both at national and protected area level, to sort of link outcomes with policy and funding. And I think I also heard knowledge gaps being mentioned there, and I think that's really, really valuable. And I also like the ambition to agree evaluation priorities both at the national and the protected area scales, recognizing the obviously the contribution that protected areas are going to play to that, but the need for some additional information out with that. The 10-year or 12-year cycle and the 3 tiers, again, I think it's really laudable, exciting. And it makes really great sense in terms of understanding that link between management and outcomes. But I think there are some challenges around that. So, you think about the timescales, that we've got some, we've got an emergency going on here, and we've got some really tight timescales. So I think we're going to have to be really careful about prioritizing and making sure that we've got our eye on those key target dates. I'm a little, I think about those annual assessments, which, as I say, I absolutely understand why we would want to have them, but that could potentially be incredibly resource intensive when you scale it up to thousands of protected areas, especially if we start to incorporate OECMs. But I think there are solutions through innovative technologies, good data management, data lakes, insights, AI. I think there's a lot that we could do to make that happen, and we're working on that in Scotland. I think there was mention within the wider report about looking at pressures out with protected areas when you're looking at that protected area view, and I think that is going to be really important going forward. I think it will help feed into that national assessment, but also in Scotland, it's very much our experience that we need landscape and seascape scale actions to deliver good outcomes for protected areas. So linking those together is really important. And then just finally, I didn't see a huge amount in here. It's maybe implicit, but I think we need to have a very strong eye to change and being accepting of change in some situations, to understand that resist or accept change, and that becomes particularly an issue when we think about climate change, and also when we're thinking about large-scale scape actions, where it could become very difficult to make some prioritization decisions. So I think that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. I wrote down here, I noted, Nigel, that you asked about the social components and why those would take as much time as we predicted. I don't know if, Graeme, maybe you could take that question.
Yeah, thanks. This is always a tricky one, is these additional values, and it kind of points to the point that Michael made as well about this kind of modular approach could be foreseen here. In the actual questionnaire of the protected sites, and also in, I can't remember which report exactly, that some background report, we do outline potential social indicators that could be used within these assessments. And we ask certain questions within the Excel tool as well about these other kind of values, non-biodiversity related values, to be included as well. But it's relatively high level at this stage, because we see this as very much a iterative process of this tool, this methodology, to be continually built upon moving forward. We did include some suggestions of social indicators to be socioeconomic indicators to be included within there. But like I said, they remain very high level at this stage. And this always comes back to kind of a lot of the challenges and issues faced with trying to scale back and refine the approach as much as possible, focusing on the data that we currently have available, or we foresee being available relatively soon, to limit resource expectations from implementing this methodology. So yeah, fully take on board that these are critical issues to include. It's very much just a work in progress.
Thanks, Graeme. There's also Nigel. Would you like to comment on that? Or
yeah, I mean, I think there are tools available. There's the IIED, International Institute for Environment and Development, has been developing tools at a range of levels. Detailed assessments are going to take weeks, which you don't want, but also small, quicker MET type approaches. I think there'd be information to be trawled from them and from other approaches. I just think there's been a lot of work done already. So I was interested in the time scale of a sort of couple of years to develop these same kind of things with biodiversity indicator species. But obviously that's up to the team.
yes. I also have a note from Michael about the SMART indicators and wanting to ask about, how were they used and the methodology. Pille mentioned them briefly. I don't know if Graeme, you can take this question as well.
Sure, absolutely, and yeah, Pille, compliment if required. So again, going back to the protected sites evaluation that we have, this kind of the main angle to this kind of leans upon the supporting elements that we keep stressing throughout the report, is that this need for, I'm going to try and say this word one more time today, nomenclature, the standardized terminology, let's just say, of all of these different aspects, which can very much lean upon reporting processes, whether it's pressures, threats, etc. We see that, in the evaluation form itself, there are questions that the response guidance is saying take data from nature directives reporting, Article 17, whatever it may be. We need to have the standardized formatting first and foremost to make these decisions about which reporting procedures can we extract data from to feed into our evaluations first and foremost. But then, of course, having these indicator values that rely upon EU reporting would make life a lot more efficient moving forward. So we completely agree with that and recognize that. And like I said, within the Excel tool itself, we stress the need to extract from these, for example, nature directive reporting cycles.
Thank you. Michael, does that answer your question?
Definitely, thank you very much. I think this is clear that the nomenclature based on the EU nature directives should be something like a base that should be enriched by those values or species or habitats that are at the national level, important at the national level. What I think is quite important is to start at the national level, so to have indicators at the national level and then to go deeper to PA's level. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Graeme. Maybe now you could all share some lessons from other countries that have already implemented similar procedures, including your own countries, that you think would be important to consider in Estonia. I know you've all touched on some of those items already during your response, but feel free to elaborate on core items and how you would see those being able to be integrated into the methodology here. Nigel, would you like to take the floor first?
Sure, thank you. Look, I think one of the big lessons, well, there's a couple of big lessons. One is that particularly when, as is the case here, and as is the case with many of the things that we've worked on, in effect, there's outsiders coming in and proposing something for a country. It's very, very important to test a beta version with the country. And that's what we've been doing here in Jordan this week. We've been going around to sites and talking through some of the issues, and we just had a 4-day workshop here in Amman with people from all the 11 sites involved, talking through whether they like the wording of the questions, whether we've missed things, whether we pull things in. There are always things that you're not expecting. Cultural differences, practical, ecological differences that maybe we haven't thought about, or maybe they haven't thought about until they get together and talk it through. So I'd very much, I don't know if you have this in plan. It wasn't time to present the rollout really, but I'd very much encourage you to do that. And bound to be surprised. There'll be new things. I think the other lesson, and it's a more pessimistic lesson, is that many assessment systems get dropped. It's one of the things that agencies, that governments cut when there's a budget squeeze. They say we can get rid of that, and actually it's one of the most important things in the manager's portfolio. So very ambitious assessment systems get dropped quicker. So what I'd again urge you to do is have like a core set of things that you really think are important, that and you're pretty convinced you're going to have budget to continue over time. And then if there's more detailed stuff, to have that there, but also, maybe use it less frequently, or maybe use it, or maybe just, beware that you may lose the funding in the future. It's a real danger. I've seen so many really excellent assessment systems run for a few years and then peter out, and that really undermines the whole value of the system. So they'd be my 2 quick takeaways.
Thank you. I guess it also links a little bit to the resource limitation component that we'll talk about after as well. Michael?
Yeah, a few lessons learned not only from the Czech Republic. I had the privilege the last year to be a member of the evaluation team in Finland, but I think Matti will talk about it a bit more. But what is my experience from the European countries and also from Georgia and Armenia is that it's quite easy to imagine or to try to develop something like an ideal system, very ambitious, but it always be a compromise. You always need to start with small steps, otherwise you will not be succeeded. You will not be successful at all, because it's really something like a combination today. It's already a combination of nature conservation, let's say, approaches or methodology together with IT tools, because there is a lot of stakeholders and a lot of actors in the field. They all need to collect the data. And if you don't develop a system that is really simple to use or easy to use with considering limitation of your capacities, then it will not work at all, and then it will end up with what Nigel said, that someone will cut the money in few years. And few more comments based on our experience. Protected areas are just a tool, one of tools that are important for nature conservation. Besides of that, we have actions planned for species. We have some conservation measures in not protected landscape, etc. They are important. I fully understand that this is something like a core or a base for increasing or improving ecological stability of the whole country. But we also need to consider other tools as well, and not to underestimate them. And the final comment is the management planning. The management planning in many countries is very demanding exercise. In many countries, you need to update the management plan, for example, in 10 years or even a shorter period, etc. I believe that there is really a huge space for a kind of evaluation, for reconsidering how to make a management planning, let's say, easier, simpler, and while keeping, let's say, the value of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Matti?
Okay, thank you. Well, I would like to share you our experiences from Finland, from our side, and as Mihail said, he and also Nigel were part of the evaluation team in our system level evaluation, as well as Nature Scott was there also, so quite familiar faces there. Well, we started to work with management effectiveness evaluation 20 years ago. So that was 2004 when we delivered system level evaluation for Finland's protected area system. And we kind of like then used IUC and framework, but even then it was tailor-made for our to fulfill our needs. So basically, of course, it seems like it's really important to plan this kind of evaluations really, really carefully, so that they can maybe kind of like continuous improvement included there. And back then, we received really valuable recommendations that we have been working with in last 20 years or so. And it's quite interesting that partly those recommendations that were given to us fulfill those needs that are discussed today, such as how to improve management effectiveness evaluation and analysis and understanding in site level. So basically, one comment I would like to make here is the importance of international cooperation. So basically that in that last evaluation, system level evaluation 20 years ago, it gave us understanding that we need this kind of evaluation system in site level. And because of our close cooperation with our colleagues in Scotland, Nature Scott, we got an idea from their methodologies and tailor-made it in Finland to fulfill our needs. But of course, there were quite many other recommendations as well, such as to improve this management planning system and make it kind of like standardized and IT tool for that management system. And also to improve, for example, cultural heritage and protection of historic sites. So that's quite important to have that kind of holistic understanding that what needs to be done in the long term in the future. Well, now we have done it again. We have used the same approach so that we can understand the change and also kind of like understand that in what key questions we have improved with and how much. So that our understanding is really the importance of that kind of holistic evaluations and analysis coming from that perspective. And now we are analyzing these recommendations and thinking about how to go forward with those. But basically, yeah. Importance of sharing good practices internationally. That's really crucial, because then you don't have to figure it out yourself, everything. And I know about our cooperation in Estonia, that now that we have this report from Finland, we have the report from Estonia, and of course next steps is to analyze it together. That how can we figure it out that what need to be done in our countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Matti. Yeah, I definitely agree. I think there needs to be lessons learned, shared. We can learn from each other, but of course, there's always going to be a local component that we all need to consider and to, you know, address the local specific components, especially in terms of social components, not just nature. That combination is also quite unique everywhere. And I think in this project, we did really aim to take the lessons learned from other countries as well. I know we've spoken in Finland to professionals as well. Over time, we've had multiple interactions throughout the project.
That is clear and very true. Wise words. One thing is also that Dave actually mentioned earlier. It's about the change. So basically, what we have learned from this 2023-24 evaluation is that it was really important for us to include the element of climate change and resilience, which were not that much included in previous assessment. So that's one finding as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because I think the idea behind these tools and methods is also to be able to see over time whether, you know, previous methods and previous applications of protection are still valid, seeing as climate change is happening, seeing as we're evolving and changing as a society. So yeah, Dave, I'll give the floor to you, but it's definitely a very good point to consider as well.
Yeah, some really good lessons I think that we're picking up there, and it's great to see how, so from the TIAX workshop, to see how some of the things we discussed there have been worked into the report. So, you know, just maybe building on, you know, Nigel's comment about making sure that you've got a very sustainable evaluation process. You know, certainly our experience of monitoring protected areas in Scotland has been that there's been a big drop-off in resources going into this monitoring. You know, we've got 5,500 plus features that we monitor, but, you know, we got down to a low last year of barely managing to monitor 80 in a whole year. It's up to 350 now, and, you know, we spent a lot of time looking into the reasons for that, and obviously there's wider economic challenges. But also, you know, talking to my colleagues who are using the evaluations, is that they weren't seeing enough of a direct link between the outcome of these evaluations and action on the ground. And I think it's absolutely critical that the amount of work that goes into the evaluation translates into mechanisms to actually do something at the right scale on the ground. You know, whether that is providing information that works for green finance, which I understand isn't something that's a big topic in Estonia at the moment, but something that's really growing in Scotland is, you know, how do we get private finance to help with some of the big management issues, but, you know, just fitting in all those delivery mechanisms. And so we really want to make sure that we're, you know, the outcomes of our monitoring links to those outcomes going forward. The other lesson I think I'd say is when we're developing these IT systems, and I think the IT systems are going to be absolutely critical, and we need to build them in a way that opens up all of the benefits we get from new technologies, such as, you know, the innovative data sources, Earth observation, new approaches such as artificial intelligence, and using a data lake approach that allows flexibility within the systems. So one of the problems we had is we built a very sequential approach to managing our monitoring system, but as soon as we wanted to change anything, you had to get developers in. There was a large cost to it, but we're now developing new systems that are much more agile and flexible. So, you know, when you're thinking about those IT solutions, one, I think we should be having conversations about sharing some of these IT systems more. I'm certainly hearing that, but also, you know, building in those flexibility and future-proofing those systems going forward. And that's got a very, very close link to good data management and making sure that data from one site, from one part of the country, from one country is discoverable. You know, the FAIR principles of data: findable, accessible, interpretable, and reusable. So yeah, making maximum use on data. And then the other one I'd say is, and I think it's well covered within the report, is making sure that we really are focusing on the biggest issues that are affecting our nature and protected areas. And that was one of the criticisms of our last 20 years of monitoring, is that, you know, we were monitoring everything individually, in isolation from each other. So there was, you know, and we'll come on to it later about efficiencies, but there were a lot of things we were measuring that were just telling us stuff that we already knew. You know, we knew that certain elements of nature are in decline. We have lots of evidence in that. So we're trying to turn it around to focus on what's the data that we need to inform the changes in management, the changes in behaviour, to halt that loss of nature by 2030.
Thank you, Dave. Oh, sorry, were you still gonna?
No, that's fine. That'll do for now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think the point that I really appreciate is that on data management and data tools. I think that when we're talking about, you know, learning from each other and there being a baseline of us doing a similar assessment across countries, that includes, I think, a baseline of IT tools and data methods in terms of technology that we have, that then can be specialized and kind of, you know, made to tailor for a country's specific needs. I think that these two things go together. If we're trying to uniformly try to create a baseline of how to do things, that data management component will be crucial in that, I think. So here also collaboration will be really important, and sharing lessons learned and sharing tools that exist, so that people don't keep starting from scratch trying to build these platforms and building these assessment tools. So yeah. I guess this takes us to the questions on resource limitations and how to overcome some of these. And Dave, you just mentioned, how do we prioritize instead of just doing everything? I think that's a really critical question. I think all of you have mentioned, you know, components of this. So I'm happy to hear more. Nigel, please go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, prioritization, very important. That came out in the discussion in Finland, where we were doing the assessment last year, and that's got to be done quite actively, because, you know, one of the things that is going to change with monitoring, I think we'll see agencies with less funding. Unfortunately, we'll also see much more up and down funding. You know, you can see throughout Europe, we've got very different political, we're on a sort of knife edge. Countries go one way or the other in different elections. So, you know, you have money one year, then you don't the next. And I think that's not going to change anytime soon. So we're going to have to be quite smart, really think through how we do monitoring. Citizen science is going to be increasingly important, both because there's lots of new tools to allow people to identify accurately in a way that wasn't available even 10, 20 years ago for plants and things. So using citizen science, using enthusiasts to support government agencies or support protected areas is getting easier. There's also more technology to do that. I can pick up my iPhone and identify birds by call in a way that I couldn't do 5-10 years ago. You know, these things are changing, and they do make a real difference. So we need to be picking up on things like that. But that also means that we need clear direction. And you know, one of the problems with relying on academics, which we and many in the UK, academics provide a lot of information to protected areas. That's very valuable, but their priorities might not be the same as protected area priorities. So you can get this kind of what David was referring to of things that are really important from a research point of view, but maybe we already know about from a management point of view. Perhaps we should, you know, be looking at other things. So maybe I'm not saying this very clearly, but I think we need to suck many more people into the monitoring process, but we also need to have a way of steering them in the right direction. And technology is helping us to do that all the time. And then the point I made before, be careful, because we will lose funding. So we need to be smart and use all the friends we have. Thank you.
Thanks, Nigel. Michael?
Thank you. I think, yeah, thank you, Nigel. What you said, I think is very appropriate. My experience with limitations based on our capacities, accepted capacities, I fully agree that citizen science is now really very important for us because we have technologies, we have applications, and we can involve everyone who is really interested to gather the data in the field. What is my fear, and I see it especially in the Czech Republic, but also in other countries, that we are losing all real experts working in the field. There is no real interest to go to the field anymore. And there is something like an idea that we are able to substitute real field work by remote sensing, etc. It has its own limitations, but I think there is also a danger for the nature conservation itself, because this is really based on real experience from the field, on PS managers' experience, etc. So for that reason, I think a cooperation with academic institutions like universities, etc., is really needed, because if we have a limited capacities as nature conservation bodies, we need to have projects with external bodies helping us to gather the data, and it should be also somehow included into the systems. But I fully understand that this is something that is really unstable, because project-based approach is always time limited and you are not able to keep it in a long term really stable. Finally, in all systems like this that we are talking about, the expert opinion is really finally something that is necessary. And I have a good experience with a kind of national coordinators or guarantees for each habitat or species, because then if there is something like a data insufficiency or some data gap, the coordinator finally can carry out the assessment with its own his or her own opinion. So it's something that is necessary, and those coordinators should be either at national agencies, or they can also sit somewhere at the academic institutions. But they should, yeah, this is my recommendation to appoint such a persons. Thank you very much. And I have one more comment about the IT, but maybe we can come to that again later, because I can also say something about the new project that is supported by the European Commission about the development of European Union-wide methodology, and this is also connected to IT tool development, but we can talk about it maybe after that.
Yes, sure. We'll go back to the IT tools then right after that. Thanks, Michael. Matti?
Well, thank you. Well, to be honest, we are also facing resource problems in Finland as well. It's quite the same understanding that Dave said from Scotland as well, that we are not able to do as much data collection and monitoring as we have been doing in previous years. Basically, well, then it's a key question is that what level of information is enough to make wise decisions? And then we also have these requirements from European Union coming from Natura 2000 system. And one key question is that once we focus fulfilling those requirements, is that enough? There might be so much national specific information that is crucial to make wise decisions. So basically, of course, it's all about finding new ways and more resource efficient ways to collect data and do the monitoring. Well, it's not only the species and habitats, it's also about social and economic aspects. So far we have been very strong with the visitor monitoring, and that has provided us information about also the economic and health benefits provided in nature context, which have been really crucial also for our funding system to have that kind of information. And that now it seems like that is also a big challenge to do that in the same level in the future. So also there we need new ways to collect data and monitoring. And we are building those systems and we are testing new methods all the time. But basically it's it's so true that it is a big challenge that how much expertise we have in the field to understand the actual situation. That is really big question. In collecting data in biodiversity or cultural heritage as well, but also in social aspects. So that kind of how to find balance, that's really big and important question. Because if you don't have that continuous standardized monitoring system, how can you assess the effectiveness of management? So basically, it's kind of like baseline information for everything. But same challenges as in other countries also we are facing those at the moment. But I'm quite optimistic that we will find solutions. And also, it's one benefit about this management assessment, PAME assessment that we did last year and this year is that it kind of like made us understand the importance of citizen science as well. So quite a lot of information in Finland is collected by citizen science. But there we also have these challenges that what will be the situation in the future. Well, the citizen science is mostly connected, of course, with species, bird species, plant species, but still that makes the base of our monitoring system. Thank you.
Thank you, Matti. And I'm also optimistic that we will overcome this, and so will other countries. Dave?
Yeah, I'm optimistic as well. I mean, so I think, you know, the areas where we need to seek efficiencies have been well sort of highlighted by my other panel members. Like Michael, I know you said we'd maybe come on to the IT, but I wonder if I could maybe illustrate some of the areas where we're focusing on efficiencies, maybe by describing what we're trying to do with our IT systems. So yeah, it's got a number of there are a number of modules that we're working on, but the first one is a prioritization module. And it's in early stages at the moment, but what it allows our staff to do when we're thinking about the priorities for the next year is get that holistic look across features, across sites, different types of sites, and to pull together various metrics that might determine the priority. So it could be very simple metrics like how long it is since we've actually evaluated a site. It could be based on the perceived sensitivity of a site. But the way we're building it is in a way that I hope we will be able to bring in new sort of triggers and indicators. So, for example, we've got all these citizen scientists out there submitting records, which include invasive species, which include our priority species. Well, we're getting close to the point where we can automatically recognize when say a new invasive species has been recorded on a protected area, and we can use that to inform the priority for more detailed assessment. There are also new landscape change tools coming online that are automatically detecting changes beyond normal expected range of changes in habitat packages. I mean, these are in development at the moment, but we're trying to get ready for these so that we can incorporate them automatically into some of our prioritization. But picking up again on Michael's point, it's really important that these are supporting tools and not replacement tools for that expertise and understanding of ecology. So what we're aiming to do is make it so that when people do go to sites to do the monitoring, they've got all the information they need, and they're focusing on the site. They understand why they are going to a site, what the priority is. So I think that's one way that we can start to improve efficiencies. The other way, and it's the next module, it's about how we plan all of our assessments and the data gathering. So there are going to be some elements, some things that we need to measure that can be collected more efficiently by doing it at multiple sites, multiple features at the same time. So I won't go into it in detail, but we're developing a mechanism that allows us to pull together monitoring instances that make it much more efficient to plan those evidence gathering exercises at multiple different scales. And then the other way that we're trying to get the efficiency, and I touched on it previously, is making sure that we're making the best use of the data we're collecting. So in the analysis module, we start to make it much easier to suggest data sources that have already been collected, to see spatially where they overlap with the things we want to measure, and then to be able to link those evidence sources with an assessment of confidence to specific attributes that we are wanting to measure. And that's using this data lake approach, but what it allows us to do in time is to do pull some pretty amazing insights out of those assessments. And I know that's picked up in the approach paper that's been presented here, that ability to get insights across similar features or pressures. So we hope we're setting ourselves up to be able to do that. But those evidence sources can be really, really varied. And just to touch on the point that if we're going to make use of these innovative data sources, innovative approaches, I think we need to really understand our attitude to confidence in those data sources. I have too many conversations with people who just don't want to deploy their innovative solution because it's not perfect. And the trouble is, if they continue to do that, we will never realize the potential value of those innovations, and we'll never start to operationalize them or get the insights into their value. So what I'm trying to encourage is a way that we can be early adopters of some of the new techniques, but just be very clear that at the moment, we need a bit more knowledge and understanding before we deploy them, but we should start using them so that we can see the value and more people understand them. So hope that's useful.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Dave. And I think it links well to now Michael being able to tell us a bit more about his IT tools as well and his experience there.
Thank you very much. I think this is, experience with IT tools from some countries, but what I wanted to say is that there is a new project that is led by the Euro Park Federation. This is a live study for next 4 years. There is more partners, including Metsähallitus, but also some federal countries and the governments, federal governments like from Spain. And what is important in this project, the aim or the goal is to develop in 40-long period common methodology for protected areas management effectiveness for European Union countries. This already submitted methodology for marine areas should be taken into account. This is clear. But what is important, and this is linked to the IT tool, very important partner of this project will be the European Environmental Agency. And a part of this project is that they will develop an IT tool that will unite collecting the data from all the countries. So this is something, definitely this is a challenge. As Dave said, the problem of nature conservation is that we are looking for perfection, but I think we should look for some kind of improvement or evolution. So I'm sure that the IT tool will not be ideal for everyone. We have 27 member states, but this is something like a promising beginning what I feel it will be a necessary step is something like a really in-depth consultation with all the countries about the good and bad examples and how to develop a kind of bridge between their systems and the European system, because no one can expect that from some date all the countries will start collecting the data through some European system. They will do it at national levels as so far, because it's really more sophisticated approach. But it's important to know, and it's important also to take this into account when developing new management, new methodological approaches at country levels. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you all. I think the key takeaway from this for me is that when we're talking about nature or climate action, we have to do something. We have to start somewhere and not just wait for the perfect solutions, but to take actions. Like, we have enough knowledge to go with something. We have some tools. We need to take actions on those now. And then as knowledge improves, tech improves, things move forward, we can adapt those tools in our way of assessments and data collection. But we shouldn't wait around for things to be perfect until we start taking those actions. And I think that that's really important. Otherwise, we're just going to be too late with actually being able to turn this around for our nature and biodiversity. Thank you all so much for your feedback and these really interesting discussion and points. I think they're all really, really valid. It's another great moment to have shared lessons together and experiences. I hope that these will continue, obviously, across various countries. I'm really interested to see the outcome of that live project, Michael. So hopefully that will be shared publicly as well. And yeah, I think for now, I see no questions in the chat. So I would just like to thank you all for your time and your contributions. It's been really great speaking with you. And we're going to take a short 15-minute break. And I ask you but also all other attendees to come back in 15 minutes. We'll be hearing from Vedran about the next steps on a European level. So thank you all so much, and speak to you in 15 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. Maybe we should start getting ready. Kai, could you please share the slides for Vedran? Or Merly?
Just a minute first. I have asked Vedran to come as a panelist, and then he will share himself.
Okay, perfect. So, well, for our final session of today, I'd like to welcome Vedran Nikolić from the European Commission, DG Environment, who will be presenting to us the latest developments and the next steps concerning the management effectiveness assessments at the European level. Vedran, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, or to our Estonian colleagues, or maybe some others, good afternoon already. Thank you for inviting me. And well, first, I also want to join others in congratulating the Estonian colleagues and also the whole team behind this project for a very good work. And my job today is to provide a bit more details on why we set out to do an EU methodology to assess management effectiveness of protected areas, a little bit about that methodology for those of participants that may not be aware, and what are our next steps in this work. So I'm trying to share, but somehow I'm not able to select the presentation. Let me just try again. Okay, so I should be able to do it now. Let me know if everything is okay.
It is loading. Yes, now we can see it.
Thank you very much. So just to start, maybe a little bit of context for my talk today. It's the policy context, and we all know that the protected areas and their management are part of the global biodiversity framework. They are important part of the European Green Deal, and in particular
of the EU biodiversity strategy for 2030. And under the strategy, we have collectively, as EU countries, committed to legally protect at least 30% of EU land and sea, so to significantly expand our protected areas network, to strictly protect at least 10% of EU land and sea in a coherent network of protected areas. But more importantly than drawing these areas on the map, we agreed to effectively manage all of them. And we set out a target to define very clear conservation objectives and measures and to monitor all these areas. And we, in order to be a credible player, also on the global scale, the European Union needs to be able to track the implementation of these commitments, but not only for that reason. Of course, there is a more important reason, and that is that the effectively managed protected areas are one of essential tools to stop biodiversity loss, to address biodiversity crisis, and to ensure adequate protection and restoration of nature. However, what we know about the effectiveness of the management of protected areas is not sufficient to make any conclusions on EU scale. We know something. We know something from various studies and reports. We also know about the shortcomings in the management of Natura 2000 network. We also have, as the Commission, taken some legal action, and we also are offering a lot of support and are having a dialogue with lots of countries and the authorities. But we are missing this very reliable information for all the thousands of protected areas. Only Natura 2000 sites number 27,000 sites in the EU. So you can imagine that having a reliable and full information is very difficult. But it's important to have that information. We are not interested in paper parks, as only effectively managed protected areas can deliver. So that's the background for the whole work, why the European Commission got involved into this problem. And we started, well, maybe a bit earlier even, but from 2021 to 22, we had a contract with these organizations shown on the screen, with the main objective to develop the first draft of the EU methodology to assess the management effectiveness of protected areas and to test that methodology. We started off with the focus on marine Natura 2000 sites and other marine protected areas, but in fact, in the first steps of this work, we have actually decided that this methodology has to work for all protected areas, be on land or on the sea, be it Natura 2000 sites or other protected areas. Now, this contract first reviewed existing frameworks, starting from the MET as the most popular tool, but there were hundreds of other methodologies and initiatives screened. Then the work followed. What followed was the actual development of this methodology. As some of the earlier speakers highlighted, it was important to tweak, to adjust the existing methodologies to better suit the EU context, to better suit the Natura 2000 sites management framework, because that's the angle that we approach this issue as well. And in the end, the methodology was discussed in 2 expert workshops, gathering many, up to 100 experts from across EU countries, and then tested in the end on 74 marine protected areas. Now, just as a review of what this methodology was set out to do, the criteria which we set for it, in order to have something which is workable, feasible, and of course, like it was said earlier, it's always a compromise. But these were the main things that the methodology should fulfill. First, to build on the experience gained so far with other work. So not to reinvent something, but to actually build and be compatible with other methodologies implemented to date. An important task that we set is to make it applicable to large number and diversity of sites. Like I said, 27,000 only Natura sites and many more other protected areas in the EU. So it has to be relatively fast to apply, cost effective. It has to rely heavily on existing information, on reporting streams, be it national, be it on EU level. One important thing which I put in red, we wanted, being at the EU, in the EU context, this methodology to reflect the management regime, the legal management regime for Natura 2000 sites. So the current obligations for the management of the sites, also the targets that I mentioned under the strategy, but also to be flexible to integrate or to cover many different protected area systems across the 27 EU member states. The methodology covers both so-called effort-based and outcome-based criteria. You can see them on the screen. And then it enables assessment at individual site level and upscaling to country, regional, by geographical regional and EU level. It should serve not only as a pure reporting, but also to give feedback and to point to the gaps and challenges, so to improve the management of protected areas. I will just mention that it, of course, corresponds to the WCPA evaluation framework. Like the Estonian methodology that was previously presented, it relies on a questionnaire with a set of predefined questions and answers in order to have a standardized approach that is easily analyzed and plugged into a possible IT systems. It's a self-assessment. It uses some kind of scoring or weighting of questions, which was done preliminary and could still be adapted. So you see many similarities between the EU methodology and the Estonian one, which was also part of the work of the contractors to try to see how these can be aligned. It came with the supporting guidance and a glossary of terms. Again, as mentioned earlier, the terminology, it's important to understand what is being addressed by the questionnaire, what each question means, so to have as little bias and difference in responses as possible. So it represents a relatively, it's not perfect like any methodology, a relatively clear systematic structure and framework for answers, focusing on the clear key elements of the WCPA evaluation framework. And maybe just as a quick run for those of you who are not familiar through the methodology, it has 6 sections. It has 11 main questions related to the objectives, pressures, conservation measures, management framework process, if you wish, monitoring and conservation outcomes. It was also for this testing phase, development phase, it used the Excel sheets. And it looks like this. It asks a series of questions, and you can see here on the top right corner, I pulled out some of the questions which point to this link to the legal obligations under the nature directives for the Natura 2000 sites, but also what we set out to do under the biodiversity strategy, that each protected area should have a clear conservation objectives. In terms of Natura sites, these need to be site specific. They need to specify condition of habitats and species which has to be achieved. It has to contain relevant attributes on the quality and quantity of the habitat. It has to set measurable targets with timelines. So all these are legal obligations, and they are kind of reflected through this subsections of the questionnaire, where first you answer one set of questions, then more opens up. The tables are linked to each other. They are pre-filled where possible from our reporting streams on the Natura 2000 sites. I will not waste much time. I'll just wanted to give you an idea how comprehensive this is. One interesting section is that on the conservation measures, where we ask about the link between the measures and objectives. Have they been developed with a view of achieving objectives? Are they detailed and quantifiable? Do they address known pressures adequately? Are measures actually implemented? Are they sufficient? And so on. And as you see in the table, each of the questions should be answered in respect to the habitats and species protected in the sites. If you recall, the Natura 2000 sites operate with a list of habitats and species protected. So we tried to reuse the reported information and make it easier for the respondents to fill in. Of course, for other protected areas where there isn't an exhaustive list of protected features, that can be done by referring to the species groups or different habitat classifications. And that's something that we are trying to work out further. And then just on the conservation outcomes, which is a very important part of the questionnaire, it asks questions about the condition of the species. Has it improved, being stable or deteriorated? Have conservation objectives been on track to be achieved? Is there a link between outcomes and conservation measures and reasons for not achieving them? You may say that this is quite comprehensive. It is. We aimed always for this compromise between being too exhaustive and having too little information. As you know, those of you who have worked on these methodologies, it's always a challenge. There's no perfect middle ground, but we hope to have achieved that middle ground. And this was tested in the workshops, and we had a rather positive feedback. In the end, results can be presented in many other ways. We tested a few, like the radar diagrams, like pulling out some scores by assigning different weights to different answers, and then pulling out some main indicator questions with this traffic light system. It's all gives different kinds of overviews, which can be useful also for communication purposes. About testing, these are in green are the countries where we tested the methodology only on marine protected areas, and that included Estonia. I think there were 4 marine protected areas in Estonia that have been where the methodology has been applied, and I hope that was useful for Estonian colleagues as well. Now, on the feedback that we got for this methodology, it aligns a bit with what was reported for the work in Estonia. I will not go through it in detail, but this methodology was considered broadly very good. The positive things were mentioned were its usefulness for day-to-day management, but also for periodical assessment. The good thing was also self-assessment, even though that has certain challenges and weaknesses. It was considered quite comprehensive, and the guidance notes were considered helpful. What was challenging, of course, and it comes back to what was mentioned already, is the lack of data to fill in the questionnaire. But our opinion was that this speaks something about the management effectiveness and effort in itself. If there's a lack of certain information or monitoring, that should also come through the questionnaire. It will not be answered, and it will come out in the scoring. So it's not in itself a problem, but the methodology should give feedback then that these are the areas that should be improved. In fact, I think most of our respondents, it took them 1 day to complete the questionnaire, which I think is similar to what took for the Estonian methodology. Once you have all the information, it should be quite straightforward. And the first time is, of course, the most difficult, and then the further updates should be more easy. What we also noticed is that there is a wish, of course, from everyone that the data should ideally draw automatically from existing databases. We have tried that, but that also links to the previous discussion on the need to use repositories and to align the technology between the biodiversity monitoring repositories and these systems, which is, of course, something which is very important. Now, 3 things to keep in mind about this work that we are doing on EU level. What we are doing here is developing an EU-wide methodology that should give an overview the effectiveness at EU scale, so thousands of sites. Of course, member states like Estonia, they will do more detailed assessment, more suited to their situations. And our main message and wish is to look for synergies, so that something that we do on EU level is complementary, is easy to integrate with the national systems, where countries will decide that they will not have a national system, that this can be the tool that they will use, and hopefully that all of it will work together. We hope that it will be seen as a valuable tool, not additional burden. And again, it's work in progress, as it needs to be finalized with also IT tools and all other supporting framework for its implementation. Now, really, just a quick opinion about how this EU methodology relates to the Estonian methodology, which is still in development. I think they're well aligned. The Estonian methodology broadly corresponds with EU methodology, in particular in the conservation objectives and conservation measures sections. I think there is a big potential to ensure integration of these two systems in the assessment phase and also on the reporting. And I think the EEB can bring this experience from this project into the new project that was mentioned, the PAME Europe, which will happen now, co-finance under LIFE. So I think this will be the time and place to ensure the consistency and compatibility of the future EU methodology with all those national systems. And we have a good basis, I think, for this, because apart from the Europark, which coordinates the project, which has is of course organization gathering many protected area managers from across Europe. We have also national agencies, to start with the Estonian EEB, but also other partners from Finland, Metsahallitus from Germany, Spain, the Netherlands, and Italy. So I think that's a message that I can pass, is that we will try together with the partners on the project to ensure that this coordination and coherence is achieved between the EU methodology and the various national frameworks, including the Estonian one. Now, a quick word about supporting this work in the countries, because what was mentioned frequently is the lack of capacity and actually the lack of resources, and the fact that resources are being reduced across Europe for biodiversity and protected areas in general. You know that we have set out, we have committed together with the countries of the EU to spend 10% of EU budget for biodiversity in few years, and that's a huge amount of money. That's billions of euros that should go to the right place, to investing into protected areas management, into large-scale restoration, hopefully in the future under EU nature restoration law. So EU funding instruments are currently available, but they're also expected to play an even more larger role in supporting the protected areas management in the future, including building of additional capacity in the authorities and also trying to get in more significantly the private financing. So in order to support this work on financing, in particular Natura 2000 network implementation, the Commission has published a guidance document, which you see on the screen, which looks into all EU financing instruments, starting from the LIFE program, from the Common Agricultural Policy, European Maritime Fisheries and Aquaculture Fund, the regional funds, the Horizon Europe, the research funds, the social fund, the recovery facility, and every single EU funding instrument can support the work on the protected area management effectiveness. It's in the objectives of all those funds to support biodiversity. So this guidance explains how those funds can be accessed either by the authorities themselves, because they have a role to play in spending this money, but also for various stakeholders which are seeking funds for the projects. And I would just like to highlight two of them. Of course, the LIFE program is a strong supporter of the work on Natura 2000 and protected areas. And one particular kind of LIFE project called SNAP, or Strategic Nature Project, is particularly suited for this type of work. It looks at the strategic policy implementation issues in nature and how to support them at the country level. It's similar as integrated project, for which Estonia is already implementing one of them. And that's usually at the scale of 10, 15, 20 million euros. So it's a good way to build these systems to track and assess management effectiveness and to support the management effectiveness and building capacity. So it should be used by all countries, and I encourage all of you who are listening in to take advantage of that. It's also a good way to connect various authorities, not just nature authorities, but other authorities that have a role to play in ensuring management effectiveness, starting from inspections, but also other sectors like agriculture, forestry, and so on. The other one is the actual instrument which has supported the work of the contract which was presented in Estonia. It's a technical support instrument. And actually there is now a dedicated nature flagship cycle which should be particularly suited for this type of work. And the deadline for applications for member state authorities is in October this year. So I encourage you strongly to look into this for further work. And of course, regardless of EU funding, it's absolutely necessary that the national authorities and management bodies are reinforced, that the funding and capacity is not reduced, but reinforced. Without this, I think we will not be able to reach all the ambitious targets that we have set out for the EU and for all our countries. So that remains essential. And I know I've been going on maybe for too long, but I just have one more slide to go. And that is about the way forward with this work at EU level. Just to say again, there is no one best methodology. And as you know, there are many compromises that need to be done when one is developing such methodologies and frameworks. And again, like I think Nigel and others said, we also think that these methodologies should be suited to the context of countries. But here we are trying to make them suited to the context of the EU Natura 2000 network and protected area ambitions and the global framework. So while member states develop different tools, we think that still we need a common EU framework that puts all this together, that gives us reliable information about the management effectiveness at EU level. Again, that's important for financing as well. We want to know where the main challenges are, where to put focus on the spending EU money. So I think it's inevitable to build such a strong common EU framework. And that's why we discussed this draft with the countries in the framework of our expert groups in the last 2 years. And we have decided to undertake further work to finalize the methodology and to make it operational. And we want to do it together with the European Environment Agency, which holds majority of information on nature biodiversity in the EU, with member states themselves, because they will be the main beneficiaries and users of this framework. And that's why we decided to implement this LIFE project to finalize and implement the methodology. It will be coordinated by Europark. And in the next few years, we plan to finish the methodology in agreement, of course, with all interested stakeholders, but then to build a new IT tool. And I think it was mentioned a number of times, it has really to be something robust, something very flexible and compatible to be able to be integrated with the various national systems. It may seem impossible to do so, but we are determined to build that and to take advantage of the existing data infrastructure that we have in the EU to make these systems as easy as possible to implement, but also to enhance the robustness of the information and to make them also publicly available so that they can be looked at by the general public, but also by the experts, academics, and so on. So that's our work plan across the next 2 years. We plan to further test, but then to really start to operationalize this work in the EU to be able to track regularly the progress and to inform further policy implementation and development at EU level. And what is most important, these systems should not be viewed in isolation as something nice to have, but also their role in contributing to all our nature protection and restoration targets. So I think the timeline of this further work is well aligned with the action plan that our Estonian colleagues have developed. In particular, I think there are opportunities to align the development of IT tools to align in further fine-tuning of this EU methodology. And the fact that some experts today present here are also part of this LIFE project, I think speaks well in favor of good future of work and future of this methodology, which we hope will see the light soon, and in any case before 2030. And we count on all of you to help us and to address the challenges that we will face on the way. So I hope it was not too much information to swallow, and I'm here to answer any questions. And again, thank you for inviting me back to you, Maha.
Thank you, Vedran, and great to see that there's so much action and considerations happening at the EU level. There's actually one question that I currently see in the chat. It's from Alexei Lofman. Are the results of the quiz public? And if yes, is it possible to provide a web page or a link?
So the results of the contract are public, and yes, I can find out the link and I will paste it here. It's the result of the previous contract, the draft methodology, and the full report. The results of the testing in 75 MPAs are not publicly available, as we also wanted to keep this a bit confidential. Although it was a test, I don't think this is publicly available, but the results in terms of analysis of the testing and everything are available, and I will paste it in the chat as soon as I can.
That'd be great. Thank you. Is there any other? I'm checking also the chat because we have a Q&A and a chat. No. I'm not sure from the team there's any comments or questions. No. Well, in that case, Vedran, thank you so much for your presentation. It's really nice to hear everything that's going on. And we look forward to seeing those results, obviously. And yeah, please do share the link in the chat. I think people are quite interested in that and the outcomes that are public. Merle Kai, unless you have any other remarks or comments, I don't see any questions in the chat, then I would say we can close our conference for today. Merle, I cannot hear you. Hi.
Hi. Yes, it's sometimes not so smooth, this asking questions and the technical. I think we had also some technical problems for people joining, but we will send the recording of the event to all registered participants. So I hope that everybody could join who wanted, but if something happened, then at least they can see the recording and the presentations. yeah, this is a lot of information to digest.
Yeah. We discussed a lot of things today. I think we've had some great discussions. I see in the chat there was a lot of commentary and discussions also between our team and the panelists. So there was definitely some fruitful exchanges today. And well, I hope that the presentations have been informative. That the presentations have been, showing the ambitions that are ongoing and all that is still to come and the efforts that are being made at national levels, but also at EU level. And yeah, Merle, unless you would want to add something else, I would say we could close the meeting.
Yeah, thank you very much to all of you who have contributed and participated. So, and looking forward for further developments from EU level also. For example, it's interesting the work about those species groups or habitat groups, because at the moment it's like coming from Natura 2000 that we should assess every species or habitat type that is protected in a certain site, but it can be very resource intensive if the site has many conservation objectives. So that's also a little problem in Estonia. So we hope that there will be some new developments on that as well. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Merle. Thank you, Vedran. Thank you to all of our panelists for joining, and of course to the teams at Trinomics and ELLE for their presentations, and to all of you who are still online with us now and who've joined us and asked questions and engaged. Really appreciate it. And yes, if there are any more questions or comments, please feel free to email us. You have the emails from Merle, I assume, and from Kai, so from Beth. You can contact us there. And I see Dave has also just posted his email on the chat. So if there are any more follow-up questions, please do not hesitate to contact us bilaterally and we'll be happy to discuss it. Thank you all for your time today, and I wish you a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you so much. Bye.